What's up, my wizards? Dev from that channel down there, and we've got your BFZ pre-release primer right here. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to go through all the colors one by one, and we're going to sort of talk about the impactful cards in each color. So, same song and dance that we've been doing with these pre-release primers. Hope you enjoy. Here we go. Quick note, it's like 4:30 in the morning where I am right now. It's just, we never sleep during like set release season, you know. I've probably gotten 20 or so hours of sleep in the last week. I'm tired. I just got back from, like, a couple hours ago from the trivia gig that I do once a week. I'm a trivia host, and that's, so sorry if my voice is kind of weird. All apologies for all of that, but we do it because we love all of you, and I am delirious from lack of sleep. Well, white cards first in order, you know, white, blue, black, red, blah, blah, blah. So, in any case, what are the impactful rares in white? Well, mythics in rares, we'll say, because Gideon is obviously maybe the best card in the entire set. Maybe Obnix will have to... It's definitely a Planeswalker, but in any case, one of the best cards in the entire set. If you get him, play him, I shouldn't have to describe why he's good. Now, Quarantine Field, on the other hand, can take out at least one thing for 4 mana, or for more mana, 6 mana, you can take out 2 guys, and it won't get too much bigger than that, although we are playing like 8 and 10 mana things in this format. So you might be able to snag a bunch of dudes with a Quarantine Field, and that is living the dream. But if you get it, I would definitely play it. It's straight up removal, and it's pretty good removal at that. Now, Emeria Shepherd looks kind of weird. Again, the games are going to go long. I want to stress that a million times. The games are going to go much longer. Sealed is always a very, very long game format. And it's going to be longer this time around because we're playing a lot of huge creatures and, you know, high mana cost spells. There are aggro decks in this format. White helps form a very important aggro deck, I think, in the format, along with black. The white-black aggro deck will be important. Emeria Angel, probably not a part of that deck. I'm not really sure where she fits in the format, although against Big Eldrazi, as long as you get land drops later on in the game, she's going to help you chump block with dudes, or she's going to help you, you know, win the game, like flyers and stuff like that. So she's important, but after you have 7 mana, especially in a deck that's not a dedicated like landfall deck or something like that, it's going to be hard to get those drops after you're, you know, 7 mana up. Planar Outburst, that is a very important card against all the huge creatures and even small creatures in the format. Awaken is definitely an important mechanic in this format, but we can probably sway that to our advantage, you know, depending on what colors we're playing. And Planar Outburst is just always going to be a good card in Limited, obviously. Lantern Scout is the last rare I wanted to look at in the white-black sort of allies, or just white-black aggro deck that employs vampires and stuff. The deck that likes to gain life because gaining life does things for it. This is definitely a very, very important card. As far as the uncommons go, I want to do Angel of Renewal first. This is actually a cool card, man. Again, I just mentioned that there's a lot of things in this set that when you gain life, you do stuff. It's, you know, good advantages to gaining life. And gaining life is important in this set as well, and white has an awful lot of cards that let you do that. You know, it helps you sort of pad your life total, wait for the impact of huge Eldrazi and other big creatures to hit the board, and sort of, you know, give you a chance to outlast. You know, it's pretty important in this format is all I'm saying, and white and black do it very, very well, but white even more so. And this is a 4-power flyer at the end of the day that gets you, you know, 3-4 life maybe when it comes into play, so that's not terrible. And combos well with Eldrazi Scions, but not sure how often we're doing that in white. Now, Serene Steward is maybe an important card for modern budget Soul Sisters, but Johnny's Pride makes good. Although I do like selecting where I put the token, but that aside, it's going to be an important card in BFZ Limited too, especially for the deck that I keep describing, the aggro deck that also likes to gain life. Very, very important for that deck, and a really cool card. Stasis Snare might just be the best uncommon in the entire format, and I'm being totally serious. Just in the whole set, maybe the best uncommon. You're going to get it every time you play it. The double white commitment is kind of lame, honestly, but, you know, it's definitely worth it to play this premium piece of removal in the set. As far as the commons go, there's Courier Griffin. I think that's a pretty fine common, although most of the commons, just like this, are mostly role players, although it does have some good removal in Gideon's Reproach, Spite the Monstrous, and Sheer Drop. All important pieces of removal. I think it's kind of cool, the interaction between Reproach and Smite the Monstrous. They take care of 2 different two different kinds of creatures. I told you I'm tired. Obviously, we'll see the big creatures, but there are a lot of creatures on the lower end of the curve that something like Reproach will take out at instant speed for not much mana. It's very important. And obviously, Sheer Drop is a pretty good card, especially if you can nail the Awaken on it. Stonehaven Mystic is really good. I like 2 mana 1/3s. This kind of reminds me of Erishan Cleric, except we can activate it over and over and keep getting the bonus from cards that get the bonus from gaining life. That's really cool, actually. Shadow Glider is our Wind Drake, but it's in white. I think that's actually really important. I like that a lot. And then Inspired Charge is a big role player. It's sort of the card that's going to be important for these aggro decks that are based in white and black to sort of win the game before bigger creatures can turn the corner on them. So Inspired Charge may be an important card in those decks too. Overall, white has, again, a lot of life gain cards, which seems to be fairly important, especially when paired with the incremental advantage of other cards, mostly in black, all in black from what I understand. And it's also got a lot of decent evasive creatures and really, again, solid removal. So I think white is a really good color in these sort of top three, although I think the top three colors in this set are all on the same plane. That's sort of foreshadowing, all on the same tier. Here's blue. Now, what's blue got going for it? As far as the rares go, Guardians of Tazim may just be a bomb. That thing is actually pretty crazy. I'm not too sure about Exert Influence, but I wanted to mention it here. I don't know about the Converge mechanic at all, except for one red card, Radiant Flames. But as far as blue goes, Exert Influence, I'm not really sure how many colors we're playing in this limited format, especially considering we don't have too much fixing that's not in the rare slot, you know? So I'm not really sure as far as that goes, how good it Converge is. But when you do Converge for like 2 or 3, you know, it's not too bad, and there are creatures we can nail with it. But even when you hit the full 5, which is outlandish and limited, it's probably never going to happen, but you hit the full 5, you still can't get a lot of the important creatures in the format, honestly, so I'm not sure how good it is, although I do like stealing creatures. Now, Drowner of Hope is insane, I think, in limited. I'm actually looking for this at this card in Constructed a little bit right now, but I think it's probably not quite there, even though it can come out on the 4th turn with Scion tokens, and that's really, really good. So, not really sure in Standard, but in Limited, this card looks like a crazy bomb that gives you a lot of options and has a huge body. So I really like Drowner of Hope. And finally, of course, I gotta mention the counterspell, Scatter to the Winds. It could be a sort of almost 2-for-1 late in the game, and it's really good to get a creature off of a counterspell. Deny them a thing, you get the thing. That's really good. As far as the uncommons go, Halimar Tidecaller is actually insane. A lot of very interesting cards with Awaken in the set. A couple of key removal pieces in Ruinous Path, Sheer Drop, you know, and even other cards that are sort of pseudo-removal that have Awaken. That's important, and even a lot of other cards that have Awaken. Hell, it's a good card, I would say, Halimar Tidecaller. And again, I'm also looking at Tidecaller for constructed play because, you know, Ruinous Path and Scatter to the Winds are both very important cards in BFC Standard, I think we all think. So it's almost a Snapcaster Mage type effect. I know it's not, but it's interesting to say the least. I want to try it out. Wind Rider Patrol is another one that I think is going to be important. You know, just a good body, and when you hit, you get to scry 2. That's really, really awesome. Adverse Conditions is an interesting role player against the aggro decks in the format. This not only gets you a creature to chump block with, but freezes 2 of their creatures for a turn. That's actually insane. Tap them down for an attack step, and they don't get to, you know, attack for 2 whole turns, essentially. So that's actually looks like a really good card to me. Or you could choose to not chump block with that Scion and use it to, you know, sacrifice and play a big creature of your own. So the card's got a lot of play to it, and I actually really like Adverse Conditions more than it looks like you should at first glance. But there's a lot of cards like that in this set. Tide Drifter I like as a really good early game speed bump against those same aggro decks. That's good. And blue has a lot of tools for that. For the draft deck, I also like Ruination Guide. I don't know how much this will work in sealed, although I could see it. But sort of for the, you know, Eldrazi colorless creature draft deck, this could be a really, really good card, and it might be better in sealed than I'm giving it credit for. Especially if you're trying to play like a fast Eldrazi deck, I could see that. Especially with some of the cards in black. That's not bad at all. And then Horribly Awry, I think, is an important card to maybe just play a one of, you know. Obviously, we've got a lot of big creatures in the format, but we've got a lot of small creatures too that help set up to the big creatures. So a card like Horribly Awry can be really good and help set up for our Eldrazi tricks a little later on in the game. Blue has some pretty good commons, especially Coral Helm, man. Coral Helm Guide. This card is really good. Blue doesn't get these kind of bears very often, 2 mana, 2 power guys. Usually they're just like vanilla or they have some kind of downside, but this is really good. We like mana sinks, especially in a slow environment like Sealed, and this can either help your huge Eldrazi get through or help your aggro guys get through the Eldrazi, late in the game when you just got to deal a few more damage, and they've just played huge guys you cannot get through. So this card serves multiple functions. I think it's really, really good, actually, especially for a common and limited. That's really not bad at all. Eldrazi Skyspawn looks insane as well for the same reason. We like Windrakes. This is way better than a Windrake. You get an extra guy off of it. That's crazy. This is a very good card. Premier common in the set. Salvage Drone doesn't look bad for a 1-drop, although I don't usually advocate for 1-drops in Sealed. This gives us a lot of card selection, and Ingest is good. 1-drops with Ingest are nice. They help us set up for later game Eldrazi tricks. That's good. Mist Intruder is good for the same reason. I actually think Mist Intruder is very, very important. A great role player for that deck. Merc Strider looks good. Bounce is good in this format, I would say, at least. Bounce is good because we're going to be, sacrificing Eldrazi tokens, Scion tokens, to play huge guys. And if our guys get bounced at that point, then we effectively can't play them for turns into the future. So Bounce looks really good in this format, and Strider by association. Also, Clutch of Currents for the same reason is an insane common. Just 1 mana for this is crazy, even at sorcery speed. And the same thing is true of, Rush of Ice. I'm actually really excited about both of these cards for a sort of budget standard blue tempo deck. I think that could be really good, and they're both very good and limited, especially if you can nail the Awaken. And then finally, Wave Wing Elemental, a very important common, I think. You can just get 1 trigger off it, it's pretty big, so that could be a pretty important role player, or even just not even role player, just linchpin creature for sort of any deck with blue in it. And it's really good. Altogether, I think blue is a solid color, man. It's a really good support color with good defense, but no actual removal to speak of. Does have some bounce, which is sort of like removal in this format, especially if you're pairing blue up with a more aggressive strategy like Blue-White Skies. I think might be good. Both colors have really good evasive flyers, and white has good removal. Blue has good bounce, so that could be a really good color combination, as it usually is. But I think even more so than usual here. But blue, again, great role-playing color, support color, good defense. And it's going to help the Eldrazi decks, too, sort of get to the turn count they need to be at. What of black? Black is an insane color, I think, in this format, especially if we consider the rares. Obnixilis, you're hardly ever going to pull this guy, but when you do, he's probably going to win you your pre-release. Drana is absolutely bonkers in just pretty much any limited deck, you got to play her. Overseer, Gul'daz Overseer, is probably a fantastic finisher for the deck that it wants to be in. Again, black-white, really good at the top of the curve there. Ruinous Path is obviously a card you play every time you see it, premium removal. Defiant Bloodlord actually looks pretty good to me, I would say. Wasteland Strangler, a creature that is removal, those are always good. And then Smothering Abomination, that also looks insane to me with all the Scions running around. So just black's rares are off the charts, man. Like, everything about the rares is good. There's hardly a bad rare among the bunch, except for maybe the thing that draws you cards and you lose life for Converge. Although that could even be good and limited. I could see that could be a good card. As far as the uncommons go, I'm going to mention the Retreat for the first time, although I think all the retreats are fair and limited, save for maybe the blue one, although the blue one does cap creatures down, which I think is very good in this format full of huge guys. Sometimes we just want to get through. So I can understand that, but I think most of the retreats are fine. The black one is one of the better ones, though, in limited, I think. Malakir Familiar is ridiculous. Probably the best when you gain life, do a thing card, at least by my estimation. We like Windrakes, that's what this is. And has the ability to get out of control in one turn, especially when we start stacking these triggers throughout the course of the turn. It can be very, very important. I love the creature, actually, a lot. Zulaport Cutthroat, another creature I love a lot, and I'm looking at for standard play, and it's obvious why we're going to play it here. And it just, it's just dealing extra damage is great. It's great. Blood Bond Vampire is a very important limited card. And once you start, again, stacking triggers, this gets huge in a hurry, so I would play as many copies as I got. Grip of Desolation is crazy, too, especially considering that lands are important. We've got the spell lands, which don't really do anything after they come into play, but we do have man lands, and some people are going to pull the dual color lands, so it's entirely possible that exiling a land is great, and also, exiling a creature is obviously good, and it's a built-in 2-for-1, that's awesome, and it fuels Eldrazi tricks. Very, very good card, Grip of Destruction in this format, especially considering, or Desolation, especially considering how big the format is. We can get to 6 easy. And then Skitter Skin, again, we're just 4 mana, 4 power, splashable, and regeneration. Also, always a good ability in limited. As far as the commons go, Bone Splinters is at least an interesting card. You know, we can sacrifice a smaller creature, even a Scion, or things like Carrier Thrall that give us, you know, bonuses when they die. That's not bad with Bone Splinters because there's a lot of huge creatures and we want to take care of them for as little mana as possible in the sort of aggro deck that we want to play in black-white. Calastria Healer is an insane card for the Allies deck. We got to play it. Geyser Field Stalker, I want to get to that. That's actually a better card than it looks like. Just playing a land makes it big, and it has a sort of evasive ability, and it's splashable. I like the card more than I liked it upon first glance there. Calastria Night Watch is a very important card for black. You got to play this when you get it, especially if you're in that strategy. It's a great, great card. Swarm Surge is just like Inspired Charge in white, a role player for the aggro deck that's going to help us sort of go underneath the bigger creature decks. You want to play at least the one copy of that, I think. Sludge Crawler and the 2-drop that is sort of like it are great. And then Sludge Crawler in and of itself is a mana sink, which is always good. Just love these early game ingest cards, especially the ones that are on curve. 2 mana 2/2 is not bad, especially when it's a devoid and ingest. Extra abilities are good. And then finally, Complete Disregard. I think it's really, really good. Helps fuel Eldrazi tricks, is instant speed, is splashable, and will take out a lot of the aggro cards that the Eldrazi deck hates to sort of have to deal with. So that's a very important card, Complete Disregard. As far as black goes, really, really hot rares in black, and good synergies among a lot of its cards, but its removal isn't as solid as usual, and that's a little disappointing, but I think it is a premier color in the format. Starting to get tired. Number 4 is red, and this, by the way, I'll give you the order of what I really think they all go in just a second here. But anyway, red is not a very great color, but it's okay. It's got some bomb rares, including Dragon Master Outcast and the Hellkite and Barrage Tyrant. These are all insane rares. And then it's got some sort of B tier but still good rares in Firebird, Radiant Flames, and Serpentine Strike is okay. It's a possible 3-for-1, but that's not going to happen all day. And 7 mana cards that don't just say like this is amazing are not usually desirable. But then it could say this is amazing. It's entirely possible. It's a 3-for-1 and it wins the game. So all of those are good, but especially Barrage Tyrant, the Hellkite is crazy, and Dragon Master Outcast. Stonewaker, this thing is crazy in the landfall deck, which, you know, red-green is the landfall deck, and it looks like red is sort of the landfall color. It doesn't appear to do too much else, except for maybe some stuff in Grixis strategies, you know, with Eldrazi. But I'd probably rather play Sultai Eldrazi. We'll get to that. In any case, Fire Mantle Sage, another important card for red-green landfall, definitely. And Tunneling Geopede is also crazy in that same deck. See a lot of very important role players in the red-green landfall deck. It's going to deal a few, you know, damage for you over the course of the game. That's important. And Rolling Thunder, of course, a good uncommon. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that Rolling Thunder is probably, again, one of the better uncommons in the entire format. And as far as the commons go, there are some pretty decent commons here. Sure Strike is actually really good. I've talked about this being the sort of new Lightning Strike if you use it right, and I stick to it, man. I think this is a really important card, but maybe not in the new standard, but in budget decks, and I think some people have come around to it, especially again in like aggro builds, very important. But in limited, it's even better. You know, obviously a combat trick is a combat trick. 3+3 and First Strike is crazy for just the 2 mana, and it can be used offensively or defensively. Sure Strike is amazing. Valakut Predator also can get really big when tricks are used, and don't forget that Evolving Wilds is in the format, not to mention some of the other cards that just we can play stuff on their turn, lands on their turn. So Valakut Predator is insane, and we'll often be able to trigger it twice, at least once during the course of the game. Kozilek Sentinel, I think is really good. Again, I like 1 mana, 2 mana 1/3s. This is 2 mana 1/4 with a really good, like, almost prowess colorless thing. That's really cool, and I'd probably play it. That's a common, that's really good. Outnumber is probably an important common, you know, good removal, especially against smaller decks. Shatter Skull Recruit is probably an interesting role player for these red decks. Nettle Drone is interesting, you know, we've seen this ability on some things before, but not usually with power. This has 3 power, so it's more versatile, and that's cool. And then finally, Touch of the Void is burn, and you will play it. As far as red goes, it's got 3 really, really bomb rares and some landfall stuff that's really good, but it still sort of feels like the Pippin to Green's Jordan, you know? It's just probably not the strongest color in the set, and I may even say that it's the weakest, but that remains to be seen. And finally, green. Green is fantastic. Again, a color with really, really good rares. Green Warden of Mirasa is crazy. The card's insane. Undergrowth Champion is also really good. Oran Reef Hydra looks pretty beast. Speaking of beast, Beast Collar Savant looks alright. All right, that card looks ridiculous. And then From Beyond looks like a huge bomb, to be honest with, you know. Just we can do so much with the card that I really like From Beyond, and I want that to be a card in Standard. It probably will be. We'll have to see. I really like From Beyond, if you cannot tell. As far as the uncommons go, there's a shortage of premium uncommons in green, but still some good stuff. Jedi Offshoot is good. I don't usually advocate, again, 1-drops in sealed environments. This is really good for the Eldrazi decks and some other decks in the format that just want to go long, you know. I keep saying, and I will continue to say, it's a mini Courser of Crewfix, you know. It comes out on the first turn, is still a great early game speed bump. We still gain the life off of our land, so it's good against the aggressive decks, which is going to be an important piece in this format for the sort of, especially Sultai, I think, Eldrazi deck. Plated Crusher is interesting, at least. It does get outclassed at that mana by a lot of the Eldrazi, but, you know, a 7-power hexproof is pretty good, but we have to be very firmly in green, which might not happen too often, although I think green is a great color. I'm just not sure how devoted to it a deck will be. 3 mana for 1 color is a lot. Aside from that, there's Rot Shambler, which is really good in a format full of Eldrazi Scion tokens, and there's other ways we can sacrifice things, but this is especially good with those. The card can get pretty big pretty fast. And I actually like Brood Monitor, which can be looked at a lot of different ways, you know. It can be a 3 mana card, sort of a 3 mana 3/3 because we get 3 mana out of it. It can be, you know, a 6 mana 6/6, we get 6 power out of it. A lot of cool things, and it also fuels, you know, if we can pay 6 for this without having to sacrifice Eldrazi Scions, ideally, then that means that next turn we'll have 9 mana available to us, which is really good and boosts us a lot. I actually like Brood Monitor more than I liked it at first glance. I think it's a good card. As far as the commons, we pick back up on some good stuff. Lifespring Druid is really good for decks that want to play at least 3 colors, if not more, but I don't think we'll be doing too much of that in this limited, depending on our mana base, which I don't think is strong enough to pull off 4 colors consistently. But in 3-color decks, and even in 2-color decks, Lifespring Druid is really good, especially in the common slot. That's an important card. Natural Connection is really good for the landfall decks, obviously, that want to play tricks on their opponent's turn, or just ramp on their turn and, you know, activate landfall. Swell of Growth for all the same reasons, especially in the decks that are really aggressive landfall decks. But Tajuru Beastmaster is easy to overlook at first, but a 6 mana splashable 5/5 with an Anthem effect is actually pretty insane and limited. And then Territorial Baloth is always good, you know, it's good and limited. Just always has been, will continue to be very solid card against splashable. Snapping Gnarlid, a role player again in the landfall deck. And then Scythe Leopard, I could say the same thing. Blister Pod, very good for a couple of different decks, but mostly again the decks that want to survive until the later turns. Call of the Scions is a better card than it looks like at first glance, and I'm actually thinking about this card for Constructed, but that's an argument for another time. And then finally, Unnatural Aggression is our only real piece of removal that's not sideboard tech, aka a plummet, you know. But Unnatural Aggression is really good in that it exiles the creature and is instant speed. That's a fine card right there. Just like black, the rares are good, and, you know, the commons are good, although I think black has a better spread of cards overall, you know. But green needs to be backed up, honestly, you know, which is always the case with green. You can't survive on good creatures alone. But green has a great number of good creatures at most slots. Although, again, uncommon is a little light, but it could be way worse. Green has insane rares and very consistent commons. Well, real quickly, I'm going to discuss the archetypes I think are present in this environment, and there's probably way more than this, but here's some basic stuff. Obviously, I've said black-white aggro a million times, red-green landfall. Those are the easy ones. Now, Sultai and Grixis Eldrazi are important. I especially like Sultai, or you could just play Dimir. Blue-black Eldrazi is probably good, and that's more of an aggro deck, honestly, and you can play huge dudes at the top of the curve. Blue-white Skies I've mentioned. I think that's a really important archetype in this format. And then even black-green mid-range, I think just combining 2 of the better, you know, colors is a good idea. And to that effect, I actually think Abzan is really good in this format because I think those are the 3 best colors. And to that effect, here's my rankings for the colors. I actually think, and I know it sounds like a cop-out, but green, black, and white are all around the same tier, honestly. I think they're the best 3 colors, and one is not necessarily better than the other, and they all have their advantages and disadvantages, obviously, but they're sort of the S tier, and then the A tier is probably blue, you know. Blue is a great support color, but it's not going to get much work done all by itself, but it is a really good support color. And then 5, because something has to come in last, I've put red. Red does, again, have some ridiculous rares, but you can't build a strategy on those alone unless you pull them, and even when you do, it's not guaranteed that the rest of your red's going to support it very well. Very important color in the red-green, you know, landfall deck, obviously, but I'm not really sure what else it does in the format other than be a sort of role-playing color in the Grixis decks. Well, that's all I've got for now. I hope I didn't talk like super fast or I was legible because I'm legible. God, I need to go to sleep. Anyway, I'm Dev from MTG. If you enjoyed the content, do me a favor for the job well done. And yeah, just say like, share, comment, do the subscribe thing if you haven't pressed that particular button yet. That's cool. You'll see all the content coming up because there's a ton of it. We've got like all the decks. We've got all the Eldrazi decks you could ever want. You know, we've got the Allies decks, a couple of different versions of those. Maybe 4 and 5 color control, possibly 4 or even 5 color aggro coming up. Hundreds of decks available in BFZ Standard, so subscribe or just check in with us every now and again because we've got some really good deck techs coming up. At least I think. So in any case, I think I'm probably going to pass out like as soon as I hit stop on the record button. And I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching, my wizards.